Welcome to Livingston County, New York's mini webinar series, Now You Know. Hi, everybody. Megan here. This edition of Now You Know is all about records appraisal. That means assigning value. A lot of times people ask questions about why are we keeping this? Why are we keeping it for this long? And this is really what it boils down to. We keep something in local government or business or any organization because it still has ongoing administrative, fiscal, legal, or research value. All things, records included, have multiple kinds of value. The first kind of value is called primary value. Primary value is what that object or thing or record was created for in the first place. And secondary value is the kind of value that something takes on because of the context in which it exists. For example, O.J. Simpson's black glove initially just had value as a glove, but later, due to the circumstances, it became a vital part of evidence. Very often, secondary value exceeds the value that it primarily had due to some kind of event occurring that adds context, meaning, or purpose beyond what it was created to do. To define the value of a specific record, we need to perform an appraisal. Appraisal is very much like what you've seen perhaps on the PBS TV show Antiques Roadshow. An expert looks at an object and determines the value based on what it is, who created it, a whole slew of other important questions that place it into context. One of my favorite examples are those New York State dog licensing records that exist from pre 1911. Oddly enough, they have taken on a secondary value because of the New York State Archives fire, and we may find information in those records that doesn't exist anywhere else. But all they were created to do initially was to provide information to government about people who had dogs. So, what kinds of questions are we asking as expert appraisers? It's the basics: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Here are some who questions. Who created it? Which department, board, committee, or functional team? And who was allowed to access it? That's an important one. What what's exist? What is it? What does it do? What rules apply to it? What file type or material is it? What do we need to access it? These are all questions that help us to understand what regulations or processes we need to apply to this item going forward. Where is the record? If the record is paper or film, we want to ask this question so we understand if this record is stored appropriately. Specific concerns about how the record is stored are asked in order to help us plan for the future of the record. Will it survive a really long time in this place? And if it has a long value, should we move it? If the record is electronic, the same question really applies. Where is it stored? What is the file path? Is the location of the record secure? Based on some of the other questions, we may have to re-examine where it's stored electronically too, especially around questions of access. If something is stored in a specific location and it has certain kinds of information in it, we may have to rethink that location based on whether or not it's secure enough. Very frequently, when is one of the most important questions. For basic things, it helps us to determine where on the cycle of 6 years or 10 years an item is in its primary value cycle. Think of things like invoices. Almost every time, we're going to keep it for 6 years because that's the LGS 1 number recommendation for us. But sometimes what era it's created in, or under which administration, or when it was fully completed can have a lot of bearing on that decision in the end. For example, sometimes we have retained records in the past that are from the 1930s and 40s because they tell us a lot about what it looked like to live through World War II era, and the late Depression era in Livingston County, and how this government handled it. When it was fully completed is also very important when we're talking about client files and case files. You can't start the clock on retention if something is still actively being added to, such as in a case file. So, we don't start that clock until we know that that file is fully done. Why questions really help us to make determinations about a record's ongoing retention. Why was it created? Why do we still have it? And why might someone need to see it now? All of these questions can really help you to inform whether or not you want to keep something beyond the retention that it was created within. So you might keep an invoice for a long time if suddenly it was created by somebody to commit a financial crime. That's a very loaded why. How is a question that sometimes we overlook in this situation, but it is so important. How do we access it? How do we keep access to it? How much would it cost to keep it? And that might include migrating it so that its continued access is encouraged or ensured. How much risk would there be if it were gone? These how questions are kind of a little bit trickier, but we can really drill down on them based on past experience oftentimes. Most of the time, when I want people to be thinking about how, I want them to be thinking about their electronic records and other kinds of audiovisual files because a lot of times those are the things that we forget to migrate. They seem perfectly fine sitting where they are on their VHS tape. However, if they're on a VHS tape, we might not be able to even see them today, much less in the future. So we really have to ask these questions. Appraising your records is super important, but remember this one thing. The amount of time we need to keep something is based on whether or not it has continued value and whether that value outweighs the risk of keeping it. As local government workers, what that means is we're trying to make sure that we can continue to work efficiently and be effective in our jobs by still having the things that we need in order to succeed, but not having so many things that we can't do our work efficiently. This can look like deleting emails that we no longer need on a regular schedule. And it can also look like retaining something because we know it's significant to our office, even though the LGS 1 schedule said it could be gone after 6 years. These are decisions that each of us as employees at a county or any other municipality or organization have to make as decisions on our own basis because nobody knows more about the records that you're working with on a day to day basis than you and your team around you. This has been Megan Sokolow with Livingston County's Records Management Series, Now You Know. Make sure to subscribe to Livingston County's official YouTube channel and follow us for updates as we dive deeper and deeper into the world of records management. See you next time.